Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
We are recording a little follow-up to the really awesome interview that we did with Dr. Lori Brotto, which aired before this episode. And we wanted to come back after we'd had some time to think about some of the things we learned on that episode and process them a little, and then just talk through what we learned. And I guess what, Sarah, like our
I think reactions,
yeah,
like after a few days or whatever it's been.
Yeah. So we both had some follow-up stuff that we felt hadn't been hashed out sufficiently, not with Dr. Brotto. This is outside of what we wanted to talk to her about, but just some things from, the awareness that we have of what women are going through from our own personal experience, but also the women that we work with that we thought would be interesting and helpful to talk about post the podcast. So this will probably be a short episode, but you never know with us. We say that a lot.
It could go sideways at any time.
Could go either way.
Yeah.
It is a Friday. At the end of the day, on a Friday, so we are motivated, I think, to try to keep it concise. Okay, so we talked to Dr. Lori Brotto on our last podcast episode. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I really encourage you to go back and listen to it. It was, for Sarah and I, two people who actually know a fair bit about hormones and menopause now. It was really interesting. Yeah, it was fantastic. She was so great. She's so articulate, so concise. So the thing I think I liked the most about her was how real she was about it all, and really practical. I think she recognizes the plight of the modern midlife woman, and in fact has done some research specifically around the impact of stress on desire, which is what she was talking about and what we want to talk about today.
Yeah. I thought why don't we define the responsive versus spontaneous desire?
Yeah, this is the main thing we wanted to talk about. And again, go back and listen to that episode because she does a really good job of distinguishing between these two things. And I think it's really important and freeing for women to understand this distinction. But the main thing we wanted to talk about was the difference between responsive desire and spontaneous desire. And basically the conclusion that we reached by the end of the interview with Dr. Brotto was that for most women in midlife, certainly for most of you guys probably listening to this podcast and the women that Sarah and I work with regularly, they are more inclined to be feeling responsive desire than spontaneous desire. But there is a lot of pressure and expectation on us to be spontaneous.
Yeah.
And so let's maybe try to I'm not going to do a perfect job of this, but I think spontaneous desire is a desire that is unprovoked, for lack of a better word. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing specific happening that you're responding to. You're just feeling like desirous and like you are interested in intimacy and sexual, some kind of
more sort of hormone driven.
Yeah.
Hormone driven. It's kind of the conclusion that we came to.
Yeah. So like think back to when you first got into whatever relationship you're in, chances are it was a lot more spontaneous and you felt a lot more spontaneous about this than you do now. That's the way I was thinking about it. Responsive desire is desire that comes only in response to an external stimulus, whether that's an emotional stimulus or physical stimulus. And basically, connection could be connection. Mm-hmm. But basically what Dr. Brotto was saying is that it's really common for women to experience a reduction in spontaneous desire and to be largely I'm having a hard time articulating this, but responsive in their desire as their hormones start to shift.
Yeah, I think that the feeling is that a lot of women are concerned about low levels of, you use the term libido, but I think desire is more appropriate, low levels of desire at midlife and postmenopausally. And that the concern is that it's because the spontaneous desire has gone away or is less. But there may not be an understanding at that time that actually what needs to be fostered is responsive desire. So the fact that the desire has changed doesn't mean that it's gone. It just means that it needs different circumstances in order to evoke it, perhaps.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's
I think that's pretty
a good
close.
summary? I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, the thing we were talking about, so first of all, we think that in itself is a really helpful explanation for us as midlife women, and also for the women that we work with, because this is an area of concern that I hear all the time. My friends and I talk about it. I know Sarah talks about it with her patients, and it comes up in my coaching practice, this idea that I'm just not as interested anymore as I used to be in sex. And I don't know if that's because my hormones have dried up or what's going on. And I think that the answer to that is that, yes, that's probably a component of it, but it's more complicated than that. And that was the piece that we really wanted to talk about. So, I mean, as your estrogen starts to decrease at the end of perimenopause and into full menopause, that can have an impact on your spontaneous desire. But there are also lots of other factors that are at play when it comes to your desire period, whether it's spontaneous or responsive. And what we were talking about is the intersection between burnout and desire, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, so on the podcast, we talked a lot about how the ways to look. Dr. Brotto was great at summarizing the importance of, for example, planning sexual encounters, times for intimacy, right? And like making it a priority, and actually setting intention to be to have this as part of your life and part of your relationship, and that the sort of changing the focus to making it an active thing rather than a passive thing, as if it was just going to happen. But then you and I talked about the fact that some of the women that we're talking to can't even get to that place because there's so many things in the way of getting to the place where they can even put it on their list of priorities, because they're burnt out and they've got the ticker tape of stress and all of the things that we talk about. So that's kind of what I took away from the discussion, was that the spontaneous versus the responsive desire is a really important piece of it, but that there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done before sometimes you can even get to the responsive desire place. Because there's so many things that need to be.
Exactly. And we didn't have
addressed.
time to explore all of that with Dr. Brotto because we had other things that we wanted to talk to her about, but we thought that that would be something that'd be interesting to discuss. So it's this idea that maybe it's even too much in the beginning for a lot of women to have an expectation that responsive desire is going to be where they want it to be just by doing some of the things that Dr. Brotto was talking about in terms of scheduling and planning for it, and, trying to become more mindful and all of that stuff. And maybe that's too much pressure even. And what we need to do is get back to a lot of the things that Sarah and I have been talking about on this podcast since the very first episode, and really work on creating some space for ourselves first, so that we might actually have the desire, pun intended, to set aside time for desire. Because it feels impossible to both of us that any woman would put that on her to-do list and prioritize it when there is absolutely no time in her schedule for herself. So that was, I think that's really in a nutshell what the two of us walked away with from that podcast was, wow, this is just another reason to do all of the things that we have been talking about, and to really start prioritizing self-care and saying no more often, and setting boundaries that are meaningful for you, that actually allow you to create a life that feels less overwhelming and more balanced. So I often talk about the fact that when women are in
sort of chronic state of fight or flight, feeling like there's a pack of lions chasing you all the time. And those lions look like, Christmas lists and, dental appointments and work and kids
expired
and
passports. That's my new one this month.
Passports.
This week's cortisol jacker is expired passports right before the first trip in 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of those cortisol jackers, all of those things do not favor sexual reproduction biologically. So they sort of shut down that part of your brain and your awareness and your hormones, if there's still fluctuation of hormones going on. And so it doesn't, the body, when it's trying to save your life from the pack of lions, is not interested in stopping and having sex.
Procreation is at the bottom of the list at this point, because that's long-term survival, and your body is really prioritizing short-term survival in that moment. So if we're in that chronic fight or flight state, which so many of us find ourselves, and so many of you find yourself, I think it's just unrealistic to expect that you're going to be able to get your brain to that place where it is actually prioritizing the act that is associated with long-term survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, if you can get yourself there and you can be present, it's a wonderful way to feed back to the body that it's not in danger.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's a perfect way of saying you're no longer being chased by the saber-toothed tiger. Because let's face it, we're not going to stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
In the hay. If we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Sarah is starting to get accustomed to my ridiculous, I don't know what we call them.
Drop, and roll in the hay.
Well,
hashtag.
Whatever. Anyway,
that's hilarious.
It's not going to have, people will remember it, Sarah. People
right.
remember when I say,
it's awesome.
When I use these things, people remember them.
Anyway, you're going to be a meme.
Yeah, right. I think that's really interesting. So then the question becomes, well, okay, so let's say there is someone listening to this podcast, because I know there are many of you who are feeling like your level of intimacy, physical intimacy, is not where you want it to be right now, or maybe even not where you objectively want it to. That may be the better where you want it to be, because if you are feeling overwhelmed and really stressed, then the truth is you're probably very happy with where it is, because you don't have time for that. Yeah. But where you objectively know, okay, this might be, Sarah and I were talking about this before the podcast, like, how do women get motivated to actually make a change in this area if they really don't care? And I think certainly from the conversations that I've had with women, it's when it starts to become clear that it's having an impact on their non-physical relationship with their partner. Like when it's starting to spill over into their relationship with their partner, and it's starting to cause problems, then I think we get motivated pretty quick. And so the question is, well, how do we start making change? If we're still feeling really burnt out and overwhelmed, how do we start making that change? And I thought it was so interesting that Dr. Brotto was talking about the connection between mindfulness and desire. So what she was saying, and again, please go back and listen to that podcast, but she was talking about some studies that she had done and research that was out there around a woman's desire being directly connected to the level of mindfulness during intimacy. Yeah. And so how do we increase our mindfulness? What can we do to increase our mindfulness? Well, this is something that happens, I think, mostly outside of that physical intimacy, that moment. This is something, this is like proactive mindfulness. You do this, you practice this outside. And we've talked a lot about mindfulness and all of the benefits of slowing down and getting better at being more present in the moment that you're in relation to all kinds of other challenges and struggles. But it is equally applicable, it seems like now, to desire after this interview that we did. So, simple practices like gratitude, 5 minutes of meditation a day. We're recording this on Black Friday, and I just got a notice from the makers of the Calm app, that they have some kind of wild sale on for the annual membership in Calm, but like using an app like Calm or Headspace or any of the other ones out there, and just listening to something that grounds you for 5 to 10 minutes a day. For me, mindfulness is my moments of sitting in the dark in the morning with my first cup of coffee by myself with no technology, lights off. I just look out the window, and right now I can't see anything because it's pitch black when I get up. But some mornings I get to see the sunrise. Being in nature.
There's so many studies on that.
Yeah.
On the connection between observing your natural world.
Yeah. And then if we're talking about just that, starting to send that signal to your body that you matter enough to take a break. Ways to do that. I was saying to Sarah before this podcast episode that I was just having a conversation with a client about this a few days ago, how ridiculous it is that we expect ourselves to be able to make changes when it comes to these coping mechanisms that we use that are not healthy, like alcohol, for example, when that is the only signal that we have, reliable signal that our brain has that we're off duty.
To calm down.
Yeah. And it's okay to relax. And so what we need to do is we need to start creating other practices in our life that do the same thing. And this requires some experimentation, and it's hard work in the beginning, and it won't seem natural at all. There's this whole fake it till you make it thing. And so with this particular client, we were talking about, okay, what if, I asked her, what do you enjoy? And we kind of went through the list of some things, and there wasn't a lot there, to be honest. And this is what I find a lot with women. It's hard for women to even identify what they like. It's, again, we've said this before, I think it's kind of like dating. You have to try different things on and try them a few times. And if they don't work out, we'll let them go and then try something different. But I said to this client, I don't know about you, but I really love taking a bath, and it's very calming for me. And I will dim the lights in the bathroom. I put a dimmer switch in my bathroom, which is like $50 really well spent, by the way. If you can dim your lights in the bathroom, that's awesome. Or I'll light like a candle that I like or something in there. And I have a little what's it called? White noise machine. And I'll put the sound of rain falling or something on, and I'll just sit in the bathtub and just chill out. Anyway, she said, oh gosh, yeah, I actually do like taking baths. I kind of forgot, and she said, I usually take them at the end of the day. And I said, well, what would it feel like what would happen if you took a bath at 6 p.m., which was like revolutionary to her.
That is so revolutionary to think
she
about
did
that.
it. Yeah. And she said it was the best thing ever. Yeah. She happens to have a little downtime at that point in time in her day before everybody gets home. And at the end of her really busy work day, where she just normally is just busying herself, feeling like she just has to keep going again, because she doesn't know how to send the signal to her body that it's okay to stop. And so this bath provides that break for her. Yeah. So it could be anything though. It doesn't need to be a bath, something that makes you feel good though. Again, it could be a walk around the block. It could be, sitting down and reading a book. I think it's the perfect time of year to start talking about the concept of the Scandinavian concept of Hygge, which is Hygge, one of my favorite things. And you can go Google this if you don't already know enough about this, because it's been the buzzword in social media for a while. But this is really this concept of embracing the cold and the darkness and purposefully creating coziness and connection on a daily basis, both with the people that you love, and yourself, but also with nature. Yeah. And I started really trying to work a lot of these things into my life a few years ago. And one of the things I do is I light a candle if I'm cooking dinner and it's dark outside. That's I light a candle in the kitchen.
That's really nice.
Like really simple little thing, but there's something about that feels more special than just turning on the blazing overhead lights and, having at it. So that's one thing I do. I'll often we have a gas fireplace. I'll often turn it on for no reason. I have a little white light from IKEA. That's a paper light that I turn on in my little room where I drink my coffee in the morning, and I don't turn the overhead lights on. I just sit with that on. I'll put white Christmas lights out and leave them out until it's spring. Yeah. Because they're really cozy. I have reading socks from Chapters, my favorite things.
Me too.
And I'll put those on, or a really great pair of pajamas. Like there are so many little things we can do for ourselves, just to signal like it's okay to relax. It's actually the point, and we're getting ready to do that. And I think all of those types of steps would be really helpful for someone who listened to that podcast episode and thought,
How do I
even get
Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
step? Because that just seems crazy to me that I would actually be able to put myself in a situation of physical intimacy and then not think about anything else while I'm there, because I have all of these things on my never ending to-do list that never really, my brain never shuts off.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that was kind of what we wanted to say, Sarah. Was there anything else that came out of that podcast that you wanted to talk about?
No, those were the main things. It felt hopeful. It felt hopeful because I, as a practitioner and talking to women for many years now, have always struggled with the feeling that women come in, where they come in and they say, I just don't care anymore. I just don't care if I ever have sex again.
Right.
And what to do with that? What to do with that? Because it's an integral part of relationship for some people. It's not for others. It's an integral part of feeling like you are who you are, like you recognize who you are for some women. So they feel the loss of it, but they also don't care.
Right. So there's, no, I hear that exact sentiment.
It's really, it's a really interesting place to be, and to try to work with it so that it doesn't feel like it's something else on your to-do list. It doesn't feel like you're just doing it for the other person. That like to awaken a new relationship with desire, I think is really what it's about. But in order to do that, you have to be looking after yourself.
Right.
And then that will come. That was my takeaway, which was just that in order to even get there, you really need to be doing all these other things.
So in other words, there is no quick fix.
Never. Well, that's,
and she talked,
often.
she talked about that too, this idea that it's not a switch that you flip on or off. Like it felt to me after that podcast that there probably for a lot of us is a lot of groundwork that needs to happen before we even get to the steps she was talking about. And so I think it just, again, this is one of the reasons why I thought it would feel like a weight lifted for women to listen to the podcast. And I guess that's where the hope comes from. It's this idea of like, there is no quick fix, but there is a way to get there.
Yeah.
And the way to get there is to start taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Just one more reason to do that. So
it all comes back to the same.
It really does.
Thing.
Yeah.
It? Yeah. How do we help women take care of themselves better?
Yeah.
That's our whole goal, really.
It really is.
Ultimately.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just really wanted to come in here today and just share these leftover thoughts that we had that we didn't have time for in the podcast, but that we thought were important to talk about and to get thinking about. And we don't have all the answers. Again, like this is a new area of thought for us, but it did seem to tie very well into the conversations that we've had on past episodes about burnout and hormones and the intersection of those two things, and stress in midlife. And
other thing, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The other thing that I thought is worth bringing up again is the vaginal pain connection. So the vicious cycle that women get into when there's vaginal dryness or vaginal tightness, and it's painful. This is for intercourse, but it is painful. And then the body tenses up just thinking about it. And then the mind starts to think, I don't want to do that. It hurts.
Yeah.
And so the vicious cycle there, and the importance of having a proper evaluation by a gynecologist, a family doctor, or a pelvic floor physiotherapist, who we're going to be talking to, a pelvic floor physio coming up. But that piece is really important to acknowledge too, because I think women aren't talking about, well, we know this, that women are not talking about their vaginal pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Brotto's research around that was really interesting to me, that, same thing with the mindfulness. It makes perfect sense to me. As Sarah was just saying, if you're not in the moment and instead you're in the future, where you're anticipating pain that hasn't happened yet. Yeah. The very anticipation of the pain causes a tensing of a responsive tensing of the muscles and the tissues. And then that causes pain. Yeah. So that I thought that was really interesting as well. And not something that we have talked about in relation to pelvic floor pain and pain during intercourse and vaginal dryness on this podcast yet, but that idea of the benefits of a mindfulness practice on that.
Yep.
Which makes perfect sense. We spend all this time like before childbirth, learning all of these breathing tools and these mindfulness tools and stay in the moment and like, let's relax. And, we do all of this stuff. And then it's like, we just lose all of that knowledge as we parent our kids and probably teenagers. Let's blame it on teenagers. I feel like they have
blame everything on them.
Blame everything on the teenagers. Anyway, that's it for us today. Hopefully that was a helpful debrief on that episode. We'd love to hear from you guys if you had thoughts on that, if it raised some things for you, or if you have some follow-up questions that you would love for us to try to address or find an expert to address. We always love to hear from you. You can send me a message through any of my social channels or through my website, which is, of course, just wendymccallum.com. And I hope that you have a fantastic day. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hi there. If today's episode has got you wondering where you are in your own hormonal journey, you'll want to download our perimenopause checklist now at wendymccallum.com/peri checklist. This free checklist is the first step to getting informed and taking back some control over your midlife. Get yours now at wendymccallum.com/peri checklist. That's PERICHECKLIST.